This is A Story of Sorts, the podcast mostly about bookish stuff, and I am your host, Karina Pereira. Hello everyone! On this episode I chat with Steph Auteri about her book A Dirty Word, the creation of Guerilla Sex Ed, and how she ended up writing about sexual health. Have a listen. Steph, welcome to A Story of Sorts.
Thank you for having me here.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh man, okay. So I'm a 41-year-old writer, mother, and wife who lives in New Jersey. I'm a full-time freelancer. I make most of my money through writing and editing, but I also teach yoga on the side. I have a 7-year-old daughter, Emily, and when I do manage to find time for myself, what's that? I don't know. When I do manage to find time for myself, I enjoy, reading all the books. I sing. I've been teaching myself ukulele and doing embroidery. I love puzzles. I do baking, all the pandemic activities. I finally embraced all of them all at once.
Did you have time during the pandemic, or was it very complicated to find the time with the child?
I mean, it was definitely an adjustment having her all of a sudden home for remote learning. But after a while, we got into our rhythm. She was able to sign into and out of all the Google classrooms. But before that, it was a little touch and go.
I kind of figured, it took a little bit to figure out what to do and how. I would like to talk about your book, A Dirty Word.
Oh, sure. should I just explain what in heck it is?
Yes, explain it to me.
Okay.
Or to us, actually, to everyone, because I've read it. So
sure, I'll tell everyone. So A Dirty Word is a reported memoir. It's at its heart, it's about how I became a sex writer in order to fix what I saw as my own sexual dysfunction. That's how I was labeling it. Though eventually I learned that I was not broken. I wasn't the problem. And, it's the way that our culture views sexuality, especially female sexuality, that is really broken. So in this book, which is built around this personal story of mine, I have connected essays about things like the history of, that diagnosis of female sexual dysfunction. And I write about the medicalization of sexuality, the ways in which we are sexualized by others. I write about rape culture. And by the end of the book, I eventually touch upon sex education and upon all the things that I want to teach my own daughter. And so the end of that book really marks the beginning of my own journey into my present day obsession with sex education. And my passion, not my obsession, my passion.
That was a slip of the tongue there. But how did your story writing about sex and sex education begin? How did it all begin?
So it started about, how old am I now? It started about 20 years ago. So the root of my struggles with sex, which are what's at the heart of the book, they started with an emotionally and sexually abusive relationship when I was 19, 20. And after I finally left that relationship, I was afraid of intimacy. We'll just put it that let's oversimplify it. So like I said before, I felt broken. Yeah. So a little bit after that relationship ended, I sort of tumbled my way into an internship that I thought was going to be one thing, but was actually me creating content for an adult personal site.
What did you think it was going to be? How different was it?
Well, I was being called in to interview for a new media internship at the Boston Phoenix. So I thought that I would be creating content for the online version of that publication, which I love to read so much. But I didn't know that the umbrella company, Phoenix Media Corporation, also owned two personal sites. One of them was People to People, which was your average dating site. But the other one was Erotic Boulevard, and that was a little bit more adult. And that's what they needed content for.
Great name also. So the idea, so you started writing about sexuality, even unrelated to like your own struggles or your own history, in a sense.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. This will be interesting. I've had a single sexual relationship and it was not ideal, but it was really fun. I was able to pretty much write in my own voice, which was fun. Yeah, I mean, pretty quickly though, I realized that, okay, I'm reviewing toys, I'm reviewing porn, I'm reviewing stuff. This could be a way for me to explore my sexuality and sort of gain some control over it, or bring it, it felt like someone had taken that control from me.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't want to have sex now. I'm afraid of sex. I feel self-conscious about my abilities to perform in the bedroom. Maybe this is the thing that can make everything better. And that's how I approached it at that time.
Yeah, just going into it without, let's say, expectations, but kind of like
Yeah, no
using it as a
expectation.
tool. That is so interesting because you kind of, I don't know, but I kind of imagine that someone who is actually writing for like a website about sex, that is going to have, you know, a lot of experience and a lot to say about it. But you
Mhm.
basically just use your own experience the way you had it, and you made the best of it.
That's right. I was like, well, they're going to find out real quick that I know nothing,
But
but
they didn't.
but they didn't. They didn't.
And when did you decide to write the book? Because the book is it's part memoir, but it also talks about the way our society deals with female sexuality as well. So
Mhm.
how did the idea to write it come about?
Maybe 5 years after that internship, I realized that I might have an interesting angle for a book. Number one,
Mhm.
like I had always wanted to write a book. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I
Yeah.
was like, someday I will be an author and that's going to happen. But I realized that I might have an interesting angle about, how maybe I could write a book about overcoming female sexual dysfunction. And it's from the point of view of a sex writer who does not enjoy sex. Like maybe that's like this sounds a little unique to me. Um, the book eventually became quite different, but that was the kernel of things. That's how I started writing it, and I was thinking of it as a personal book with a side of like servicey, like self-help, like a side
Yeah.
of self-help. Like here's my journey. But at the time I knew I wasn't the only one who was experiencing what I was experiencing. And I felt it was important to write what I was writing because it helped other people feel less alone in their own experiences. I mean, I could already see this in the short form work I was already writing. And I was like, well, let's write a whole book to help make people feel less alone in their shitty sexual experiences.
And especially coming from someone who writes about sex, like you making a career out of that, I think it must be very comforting to those, you know, going through the same situations.
I
Um,
hope.
yeah. Do you have any tips or advice for people who would also like to start writing and developing anything in that direction, writing about sexual health or education?
If we talk about writing personally about sex, or anything personally, really, like many of the incidents I write about in my book, I had written about them so many times before in so many iterations, because I think I had to. I was really close to the story when I started writing about it, and it was like I was using that writing to figure things out for myself. And it took years before I was able to take this very personal writing and turn it outward and make it universal. So I would say, obviously, don't be afraid of writing a lot of crap before you start to see more clearly what the heart of the story is, what the angle should be, what the arc should be. On top of that, when you're talking about personal stuff, and it could get especially dicey with sex, it makes people uncomfortable. I would say, well, what I try to do is to always be harder on myself than I am on anyone else in the pieces I'm writing, in the book I'm writing, because those people are a part of my story, but they did not ask to be written about. So I need to make sure, number one, that this is about me. It's not
Yeah.
about me placing judgment on anyone else. So again, yeah, I don't place judgment on anyone else. I don't make assumptions about others' motivations or about their emotions or about their thoughts at the time, or at least I try not to. Um, when it comes to writing about sex in general, because it does make people feel so uncomfortable, I would recommend that people ask themselves why they want to write about what they want to write about. Why is it so important to them? And then ask themselves what's the worst that might happen? What do they fear could happen if they write about sexuality? And if the importance of the subject matter means more to them than what they fear could happen, then go for it. Just go for it. Because I mean, like I said before, a lot of people likely experienced what you experienced, and it's important for them to hear that they're not alone in that. And also that because there's such a silencing around the topic of sexuality, I think it's important that more people open up those conversations.
You were mentioning it now about like the way that people react to you, because I remember reading in your book that when people knew and when they learned that you were writing for a magazine, or that their reaction towards you was a bit different, including like, you know, heterosexual women in relationships that like they had a husband or a boyfriend, and the way that people react to you, and that can't be difficult. Sorry, that can't be easy to deal with either.
I mean, you start to get a sense over time for how someone might. Well, let me back up. So there's this one time I remember clearly, where I was at a party and we were talking about what we do. And I was like, oh, I write about sex. I write about sex toys. I do this, I do that. And this one woman there who was married to a friend of mine said, oh, I don't need all those bells and whistles. And it seemed so it was so judgy. It was so judgy. Like, thanks, okay. But it also, like, a part of me felt like it came from a place of fear.
Yeah.
Like a place of self-consciousness, like, oh, maybe I'm not wild and crazy enough, not like I am, but maybe I'm not wild and crazy enough, so I need to justify why I am the way I am sexually, to separate myself from what I'm assuming about you.
Yeah.
The crazy nymphomaniac over there,
But because it also like comes with that idea of, you know, being, maybe I wouldn't say Puritanist, maybe, but maybe I lost the word in English.
Are we talking about conservative? Are we
yes, conservative. Thank you. Because, you know, like, one thing that you talked about in the book is about coming from a religious environment, which I really related to that. And especially because I have the feeling that as I grew up and the people around me, it was in a very small village, and everybody is kind of like religious. So when you talk about religion, most of the sins people actually talk about has to do with sex. Right. Like, in the end, almost everything goes towards sex, and that kind of reaction you do get a lot from conservative environments as well. Oh, I'm not using that. There's no way I'm using that, or because I'm not that kind of person, especially with women, right?
I mean, that's a lot to untangle there. I mean, so I was raised as Roman Catholic, and I don't know that we weren't uber religious. I feel like it's hard to untangle how much of the values my parents carried were from, well, not my father, my mother was Roman Catholic. So it's hard to untangle how much of the values she carried around sex had to do with her religious upbringing and had to do with the culture at that time, because parents weren't talking to their kids about sex, and their parents hadn't spoken to them about sex, and it was always seen as a taboo topic. And I think a lot of parents, even now, are afraid, like, oh my God, if I talk about sex with my kids, that it's sort of giving them permission to go forth and have all the sex.
Yeah.
Obviously. There was always the understanding that sex was something that did not happen until after you were married. Like it was something that happens within the context of marriage. And me being the goody that I was, and I was the rule follower. I was such a dork. I just internalized those messages, and I assumed up until the very moment it happened that I would not be having sex either until I was married.
Yeah.
And so when I did have sex, and it was because my boyfriend at the time coerced me into it, my older boyfriend, what I felt, the first thing I felt was guilt and fear over what my mother would say.
No, that's absolutely, I can totally relate.
It was not like, oh my God, you've taken a thing from me. It was like, oh my God, what's my mother gonna say?
What if they find out? So I'm very curious to kind of like, my family is the same. My father doesn't really care. He says he's religious, but he doesn't really go to church or anything. My mom is Roman Catholic as well, and there's all the mysticism around, like, you're supposed to date quite a few years before you have sex with someone, and you don't really discuss it, etc. Everything, it's kind of hidden, and jokes are made, because they're jokes. So I'm kind of curious, like, how did your mother react to you becoming a sex educator as well? I'm sorry, your reaction is so funny.
It's so funny because when they came and helped me pack up from college, like, because I had been in that internship, I had an entire trunk's worth of stuff. And I just remember like seeing my dad go for a container that I knew had stuff in it. And it's like I was like I see myself in slow motion leaping across the room, like, no, don't do it. But eventually I was open about it at some point. I mean, I was like, I didn't want to share my toy collection with them, but I was open about the fact that I had been writing about that. And way back then, my mom was pretty much like, oh, this is just a phase, and then she'll go write about all the other things that have nothing to do with sex. Which is hilarious to me now.
In hindsight.
Because
with your work,
I have been writing about sex this entire time, and though it's taken different forms and had different points of focus, I'm still writing about sex.
But also the way it evolved.
Well, right, it evolved, and I think she's more comfortable with the fact that, oh, I write about sex education. Oh, I write about public health. Like, these are things that seem more legitimate, I guess, less terrifying than, oh, I write about pleasure and libido and desire. So I think it's more palatable to her now in its current form, which I feel shouldn't negate all of the writing I did before, but I'll let her have it. I'll let her have that.
It's like when I told my mom that I'm not religious anymore. She's like, what do you mean you're not religious? And then she just told me, you know what? Just, I'm going to pretend you are. Okay. And we talked about it.
I remember when I said that I was, coming like backing away from the church, she was like, oh, I talked to the priest and he said that's good because it means you're questioning, which means you're taking it seriously. Never mind the fact that I never came back to the church. So
we don't talk about that.
That's right.
Do you think that men and women writing about sex have different experiences in the way others perceive them? And like, are there men writing about sex and sex education and health? Because I don't know. I only know women.
Well, when I think of men writing about sex, I feel like a lot of it is from, like, for example, everyone thinks, oh, Dan Savage with his advice column. And I could say that Justin Lehmiller is another one. He writes about sex within the context of research, but it's hard for me to think about male sex writers who are writing about it from a personal perspective. Like, I can only off the top of my head think of, there's this one guy, Grant Stoddard, back when I was working at nerve.com, back when nerve.com still existed, rest in peace. He had a regular column for them where he was, he was writing about different sex related experiments every week. And it was a lot of fun and he was super funny. And I think he continued writing about that, though, without the Nerve platform I haven't seen his work around as much. But it's hard for me to think of any other male writers who are writing about sex in quite that way. Which is interesting because I think that men get a lot of leeway when it comes to writing personal stuff in general, versus women writing personal stuff, because immediately, oh, that's woman stuff. We're like, oh, that's chick lit. Oh, that should just be that in a parenting magazine. No one else would be interested. And we talk about that. There was a lot of conversation around, what was it called? The first person industrial complex, as far as personal essays. And, it was a whole lot of navel gazing, narcissistic. And like, if men write the same thing, they're writing about the human condition, right?
Yeah, it's
But if women write about it,
then it's about women,
right?
Specifically.
And no one cares about that. No one wants to hear about that shit. No.
I actually, this week I found out, I went to research why Jonathan Franzen was so known. And then I came across, of course, the Oprah, how should I call it, situation, I guess, in which basically what he said is she chose his book for her book club, and he kind of backtracked, saying that he was afraid that if the book was had some connotation with Oprah, it would not be read by men. And while on one hand, this is obviously entirely ridiculous, it does have a point, because it is true that men might see that a book was chosen by Oprah's book club and just not pick it up. And of course, he shouldn't have done what he did. Terrible. But I don't, like, when I read, I was like, it's not like he doesn't have a point. What he's doing is wrong, but he does have a point. This may happen.
Well, right. No, men only read books from other men.
Yeah.
Women, it doesn't matter. Men, we could read. I mean, we women could read whatever the hell we want. Like, we don't care. I mean, like, we don't. I'm sorry.
I sidetracked a bit because it did come back to that, and it is in every aspect of life. Like you're saying, like, the male is the.
I mean, you see this like beyond the literature we were allegedly talking about. Like, so I write a lot about gender bias also within the field of medicine, and and gender disparities in healthcare, and it all goes back to the research upon which our healthcare system is built, and the fact that most of the research is conducted upon white cisgender male, and that's like the cookie cutter, like, this is the human, man is human, and this is what all the research in the healthcare is based upon. But what if a woman reacts differently? Whatever. This is human. This is what we need to follow. This is what the research must follow, and this is the healthcare must follow. Like,
and we saw that now recently with the COVID vaccine, that
you
still don't have, you don't really know exactly what kind of complications precisely can bring to women.
Right, because we didn't bother testing for that.
No. It's not that we can't find out. It's like they don't want to.
Right.
Tell us about good question. Is it Guerilla Sex Ed? How do you pronounce it?
I pronounce it Guerilla Sex Ed, but I end up when I talk fast, it just ends up sounding like gorilla, like the animal. And when we were setting up the website, my husband and I, because he's a web developer, we actually purchased the URL Guerilla, GORILLA.
Because people are going to end up
just
there.
In case.
That's super clever, though. Because if people are listening, I will put this in the comments, of course, like in the show's notes, obviously. But that's very clever, because then people will always end up on the right side.
Exactly.
So tell us about Guerilla. I sound like Gorilla as well.
I mean,
Guerilla,
it sounds the same.
Sex ed. I still say sex ed, and it's ed. It's kind of crazy how we read things in our minds. Tell us about it.
So Guerilla Sex Ed is it's an online resource for parents and other caregivers who are looking for alternative sources of information about sexuality that they can share with their kids. Perhaps because school-based sex ed has failed them in some way. Who knows? Maybe. Why? So back when I wrote my book, A Dirty Word, the part of the book I was actually most proud of was the appendix. I love me a good appendix. And at a certain point, I was like, gee, Willikers, I sure do wish that I could just update this appendix indefinitely and just keep publishing the book with an updated appendix. And because sharing resources with folks who need those resources really lights me up. I love to do that. I love it. So the site was born, and the heart of that site is a searchable directory of sex ed resources, mostly books because I'm a giant book nerd, but also, podcasts, websites, advocacy organizations, and on and on and on. So I'd like to eventually build the site out and offer, downloadables like parent scripts and tip sheets. And I'd like to offer live workshops. Maybe that'll start coming in 2022. Let's see. We'll see.
In person.
Oh, Jesus, that sounds so scary to me still.
At work, people started doing in-person things again, which it is scary when you started, because you're like, it's kind of weird because you want to keep distance, but then you're in a group. But
it's impossible.
Yeah, it really requires adapting, and unfortunately, things at the time that we are recording this, things in the Netherlands are getting a bit bad again. In Rotterdam specifically. So I hope that, because they just also excluded the 1.5 meter rule and the masks inside as well. So it's kind of, let's see, a bit afraid, but
I mean, I feel like I've been holding my breath this entire time, just waiting for a vaccine that my child can have.
Yeah, of course.
Because I'm still like, okay, I'm vaccinated, my husband's vaccinated, all our family is vaccinated, but my child can still, I can still catch something and it might not hit me hard, but I can pass it along to her. And I feel like everyone's forgetting that.
Yeah,
or
of
they
course.
Just don't care.
Yeah, because people, I feel also that a lot of people are like talking about freedom without, which for me, to me makes no sense, but without actually thinking or considering that the longer we remove the measures, the longer it will take for us to just go back to whatever they call normal.
Yes. Yes. But, this seems like a logical conclusion.
Yeah, but no.
I don't know.
No, people are just happy. Sense. Like everybody's happy when the masks just went out, and I was like, oh no, no. But yeah, maybe maybe in 2022 there will be something to look forward to.
I just keep thinking, I keep telling everyone 2022, but that's what we all said about 2021. We're like 2020, not 21. It's all going to be better then.
So at some point. Besides writing, you are also a yoga teacher. Do you want to tell me how that happens, the relationship between the work you do with your writing and yoga?
I feel like it feels like there shouldn't be layers, but there are layers. So I started practicing yoga at a difficult time in my life. My husband and I were trying to get pregnant and we're not having a lot of luck. And things were getting a little dicey between the two of us. And we almost separated at that point. But when I went to my first yoga class, I wasn't thinking, oh, this is going to help me feel better because my life is a shit show. I was thinking, I want to look really cute in skinny jeans.
Oh, that's a great motivation. I mean, why not?
Exactly. And now that I live in leggings, I'm like, yes, yoga.
I chose the right thing.
But really quickly, number one, I realized that yoga was help. When I started trying to get pregnant, I tossed all my antidepressants and my anti-anxiety meds into the trash. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get pregnant so soon. And I won't want this in my system. And then I just never went back on it. So that might have contributed to the turmoil within my marriage, but who knows? But I found that yoga really helped me feel a lot more stable mentally and emotionally. So that was one thing, but it also helped me develop this body awareness that I had not had before. And it was really interesting. And at the time, I mean, on top of everything else, I used to experience pain during intercourse.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know, like, medical professionals weren't very helpful.
Oh, yeah, no.
No. You're surprised. But I found that in gaining an awareness of my body and in gaining an ability to relax the parts of my body that were tensing up and probably contributing to my pain, the pain eventually went away like magic. Wow. And
do you think it was both mental, like body, of course, but also mental?
I mean, all of these things it's usually when we grapple with these things in the bedroom, they're usually biopsychosocial. So it's a biological issue, it's a cultural issue, it's a psychological issue. There's so many layers to what could be going on. Everything affects the other thing. They all affect each other. And it's interesting how so many of us don't have a strong body awareness. We're very disconnected from our bodies. And when it comes to sex, we're not encouraged. I'm losing my voice. We're not encouraged to develop that familiarity with our bodies. So for me, though, it's certainly, not the purpose of yoga. It definitely affected the relationship I had to my body, and by extension, the relationship I had to my sexuality. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does perfectly sense. But that's why I was also asking, because like knowing what you write about and knowing that you're a yoga teacher and especially you have a newsletter, which is Thunder Thighs. I thought just want to make sure I knew it. And when I got your, I think, last newsletter, it was for me it was I kind of started thinking about it, like is it also a relationship between the two things, because obviously yoga is so much mental as it is physical. And sometimes I think people like you went into yoga expecting one thing that was maybe more bodily.
Yes.
More physical.
Shallow. Is that what we're saying?
It's not shallow. I think, you use the tools you use for what you want. That's perfectly acceptable. Yes. But then it kind of surprises you in other ways. And that's great.
True. It's true. And you know what? There's people use yoga as a form of healing from trauma, which is why we have trauma-informed yoga as well. And I think it's such a perfect tool for that. And eventually, when things are less 2021, one of the things I do hope to offer are yoga sex ed workshops, where I want us to sort of work at developing that connection to our bodies and interrogating the feelings we have about our bodies and the feelings we have about our sexuality. And then, going from there to maybe have these larger conversations about sex. So that's, we'll see. I just crossed my fingers like people could see that. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed for that. Yeah, no, it seems so interesting to also develop that, because like you said, you started writing basically as a way to deal with trauma and to understand your trauma. And people sometimes don't understand that because they just look at the sex part of it. It's like, sex, scary and
oh my God, she's doing all the things in the bedroom.
Yeah, and she
wants it all the time.
and knowing your body can be so important for so many things, including that, and including pleasure, of course, which is also important, obviously. So what other projects are you involved in? Tell me all you're doing at the time.
Oh God.
We have time.
I'm still writing. I'm still writing creatively, and I'm still writing as a journalist. So all the short form stuff. I managed to keep myself busy. I am the essays editor for Hippocampus magazine, which is a literary magazine that is devoted to creative nonfiction. So that takes a little bit of time. Right now, I'm on the planning committee for the National Sex Ed Conference, which is coming up soon. It will probably have happened already, but by the time everyone hears this.
That's true. Is that, do you do like an annual thing?
It is. It's an annual conference. It happens in December. So come next year, everyone.
Yes. This is going to be published like in 2022 anyway. So
yeah. No, we'll be planning for the next one. And beyond that, and beyond growing Guerilla Sex Ed, I'm actually putting together. I didn't think I was gonna write another book, but I'm putting together an anthology proposal with some writer friends of mine, and we'll see what comes of it. I don't want to reveal anything, but I am super excited about it. So we'll see. Also, fingers crossed.
I was going to ask, can you reveal anything about it? But it's still very, very new.
Yeah, no, I don't.
So
I don't want to presume when I have like a team I'm working with. They're going to be like, Stephanie, why do you say that?
So the following question is, where can people find you and those projects online?
So my professional site is stephauteri.com. And on that site, you'll see a link to my newsletter, my tiny letter, which is called Thunder Thighs.
Amazing name.
Thank you. I'm also on both Instagram and Twitter at Steph Auteri. I am more active on Instagram these days. And of course, there's guerrillasexed.org, and I have a Substack newsletter that goes along with that. And the link for that is also obviously on the homepage of that site. I think those are all the things. We'll ignore Facebook. Let's just push that to the side.
What's Facebook? No, I'm kidding. Sorry. I'm leaving Facebook. Like, I'm just using Facebook less and less for some reason. I mean, not for some reason. I know the reasons. I'm just not really.
The only reason I ever signed up was because my sister-in-law posted incriminating photos of me from my bachelorette party when I was super wasted, and I was like, I
gotta defend my own.
I need to see what's up here, and I just never left. But it's like I'm barely on there.
Yeah, I have you have friends and family there, and there isn't a specific reason to just let go, but it's like, right. I just I go
publishers don't like it when you're not on Facebook. They want you to be on Facebook, they want you to be on Goodreads, they want you to be on BookBub, they want you to be on every single social media platform. God forbid they ask me to get on TikTok. Forget it. I'm going to draw the line. I'll watch TikToks. I'll watch the TikToks of others. I am not cool enough to be on TikTok.
Well, I disagree, because I'm not cool at all, and I'm there.
Are you there? Well, I'm sure you're. I mean, I don't think video is my ideal medium.
No, me neither. Like, that's why I only post like one video every month or something, which is when I look at myself in the video, I'm like, yeah, it's okay. It's not good enough for video, but it's fine.
I have like the occasional videos on Instagram, like ridiculous ukulele videos. If your viewers want really terrible ukulele videos and like me baking with my child,
that's
I'm
the
here
place
for you.
Because I do think people get more engagement if they show their face.
Yeah.
But then again, there's a reason why I have a podcast, and I will continue.
That makes total sense to me.
There you go. Videos on my thing. But I do think TikTok is funny and fun. But the fact that like publishers actually ask you to be a part of it rather than having to be a choice, that's a lot of pressure.
Well, no, when it's forced, I think that people can tell.
Oh, yeah, because you're just going to create something. Oh, okay. I've been told to do this. Now this is the last question of the podcast, always, and it's an all-time favorite book and a book you would recommend right now.
Okay, first of all, the first half of that question is terrible, because how
everybody gets upset with me.
So terrible. So, okay, well, when I was growing up, my favorite book was Michael Ende's The Neverending Story. And I have read it so many times, and I'm just gonna put that as my all-time favorite book, because if I think about all the books I have read in recent years, I will collapse into a heap of overwhelm, and I can't do it.
But I do think it's what happens when like someone asks you for a recommendation, And you immediately
There's too many.
freeze?
I'm like, can I bring up my spreadsheet and like, can I?
But what do you like exactly? Oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I forgot that. Did I ever read?
I think the only other book that maybe has rivaled The Neverending Story in terms of rereads is Stephen King's It.
Oh, okay.
And I'm a big horror person. And so that book I've read at least 20 times.
Okay.
Yeah. So as for what I'm reading now and what I would recommend now, I'm reading 2 books at the moment, and I would recommend both of them. I am rereading Becky Cooper's We Keep the Dead Close. Is that the title? We Keep the Dead Close. I think so. Yes, which is a true crime book. I read an e-galley of it about a year ago, and I loved it so much.
Mhm.
And I just received a copy in my latest feminist book club box. And I'm so delighted to have a hard copy of the book. And I'm absolutely reading it again. And it's still just as good as it was a year ago. So I would recommend that. Plus, I'm at the end of an e-galley for Claire Kohda's Woman Eating, which is billed as a millennial vampire story.
Ooh. That's, I mean, I'm sorry. When you said woman eating, I thought it was going to be about food.
I mean,
Like
but
an
it's
historical
interesting
thing, but it's better.
Yeah, no, it's better. And it's really interesting because this is a vampire who wishes she could taste the foods and enjoy the foods that humans eat. And
Okay, I gotta take a look at that.
yes, no, it's so
'Cause-
good.
Wow, because I do have this conversation sometimes with people about like who would like to become immortal or not.
Hmm.
But then which kind of like what are, okay, you become immortal, but what are the what, you know, it's not everything is possible.
Right, the pro con list,
Yeah.
And this vampire is just at war within herself between her vampire side and her human side. I can't there, I'm fully in screen. They can't see it, they don't know. She's at her vampire side and her human side are at war with each other. And you know, food is the largest way in which it manifests for her.
Wow.
It's
Yes,
a lot
I
of
am
fun.
sorry. I'm just thinking that yes, I want it. I definitely am going to search for it. And
Yeah.
also, I've been also lately reading more horror because
good.
I was not a horror person because I thought I was going to be very scared of the books.
But then that's why. That's good.
No, but the opposite happened. I was reading, like I read The Shining, and I was like, this isn't scary at all. I'm just afraid of being afraid, basically. But then I got to the end of the book and it's not scary at all. So I started to become a bit disappointed. And then I read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And I was like, and then like Tender is the Flesh. And then I was like, okay, I know what kind of horror I like.
Right. No, because there's so many different types of horror, and some of it is just cheesy, and some of it's just fun, and some of it you like shouldn't read if you're home alone at night. Because then you will have nightmares.
Yes.
And those are my favorite ones. Those are my favorite.
I still have to find like something that really scares the bejesus out of me, because I found the things that is like this really gory. So like, or this is like really good for one reason or another, because it's so, you know, it's so clever, but I haven't yet found the scary one. So but I'm going through a list. So
I have to go through my spreadsheet.
Because you talked about it, and like I haven't read anything else by Stephen King since I think Carrie. So I read The Shining and then I read Carrie. But
Carrie was one of the first ones I read back in junior high.
But I didn't think it was scary. It was just like, you know, for me it was actually kind of cool.
I mean,
I like that kind of stuff. So I'm still searching for that. So you talked about it, and I was like, maybe I should give Stephen King.
Yeah, It and The Stand are my 2 favorites, and they're like among the largest of his, like his huge doorstopper book. I know everyone complains that he really needs to be edited and someone needs to edit him, and okay, fine. But I love them because I'm like, I don't want it to. Oh my God, do you know what actually terrified me? Because, well, I'll just say Chuck Wendig. Oh, Jesus Christ, was it called Wanderers? A friend told me she was reading this book and she's like, but I can't finish it because
it's too scary.
Because it's too scary, because it's too close to like fears around the pandemic and blah, blah, blah. So Chuck Wendig, Wanderers. She was like, you finish it so you can tell me what happens. And then I told her, she's like, oh no, it's even worse than I imagined.
So she's asked kind of like someone who can test it out for her.
That's right.
Well, maybe it's a good reason to check it out then. You liked it.
Go for it.
Right?
Go. I did. I enjoyed it very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so we got a few
a whole
more.
grab bag.
Yeah.
I like totally broke the rules of what's the one book.
Everybody does, because I also say that you can. Because sometimes people look at me like in a sense like, does she like books? And she's asking these questions. So
she knows exactly what she's doing.
Yeah, but I'm like, okay, you can choose like, 4 or 5, just don't go for the 20, but you can choose a few. It's fine, especially because then people get a few advice on what to read, and that's always fun. So Steph, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. And
thank you.
Yeah, we will I will put all the links on the show's notes so people know where to find you online.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for listening to this hot mess.
It wasn't that. It was great. You can access today's show's notes via my pod page, which you can find along with all of my social media links at linktree/Carina Pereira. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting A Story of Sorts on Patreon. Patreon is a platform which allows you to contribute monthly to the podcast in exchange for extra content, such as early access to episodes, a shout out at the end of an episode and on Instagram, and choosing a theme for me to talk about on the podcast. You can become a patron at patreon.com/A Story of Sorts. Leaving a review would also be highly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to get a notification when the next episode hits. I'll talk to you then, and thank you for listening.